Bitcoiners, hope you're doing great. We got a Thomas who's first up. How can I be the first to comment? Where is everybody? Well, they made it. We got a whole bunch of people in the room already. I'm here, homemade. Good morning, indeed. Ben, good morning, favorite people. We love it. T-Dog, good morning, all. Indeed, Hoddle T, good morning, my man. Hope you're doing great. Wake up to breakup. We're going to wake up and break up. I'm here. Good morning. Hope you're doing good, Lightning Vend. Hope you're doing good. Daniel, what's up, my man? It is beautiful here in Vermont, that's for sure. We're loving it. Be a shelter. Good morning. It's currently 29:24 in Moscow time. Time for a coffee. Indeed. King Mansa Musa. Greetings from the Sunshine State, where Bitcoin is the fuel for a brighter future. We'll be talking about that today for sure. Good morning, Christine. Hope you're doing great. Daniel was down in Gainesville a couple weeks ago. Like the area. I would like to go there too. I'm a fan of the South. I can't remember the name, but there was a beautiful spring-fed lake. Wow, would love to see that. Assalamu alaikum, Muslim Bitcoiner. Separate money and state. FinCEN don't think so with their proposal to regulate CVC mixing, a real war to pick with Bitcoiners when withdrawing from exchanges becomes illegal. That's what we were talking about yesterday, right? We were talking about, oh yeah, oh dang, I do have a Cubs hat on. I forgot to put my Satoshi hat gets bleached by the sun very regularly. I guess we'll do a different one this morning. But yeah, thanks for this was the hat I wore as a little boy. I had this exact Cubs hat, but I found it recently at my favorite brand, Ebbets Field Flannels. They make all kinds of really cool things. I think I mentioned that before. I found them during the Chaz time. Remember when Seattle had a breakaway state during the summer of love, summer of 2020? So they make really cool stuff. A lot of my t-shirts come from them. If you see me wearing a Montreal Royals thing, they do a lot of old branded stuff. Anyway, they're a great brand. I'm a fan. This is not an advertisement. We don't have a read-in ad yet at the start of the show, but I would take Ebbets Field Flannels as a sponsor. Muslim Bitcoiner, we are going to be talking more about a little bit anyway, because we've been telegraphing how fake news operates, right? And Elizabeth Warren attack on mixers and Hamas and all that stuff. And we were able to easily predict that it would be on the Atlantic Council schedule this week, which is a Mike Benz insight. He had nothing to do with the Bitcoin part of it, but we've been saying that the Atlantic Council is probably the biggest CIA cutout out there. And so it's only natural that they're and very predictable that they'd be talking about Bitcoin stuff because it's coming. So there you go. There you go. Austin says college towns are nice because they're government subsidized. Yeah, he was in Gainesville. What's the college in Gainesville? Oh, is that the one? Is that the Freedom thing with Christopher Ruffo? I don't remember. Tommy, let's end fiat before fiat ends up. That's what we're talking about today. Well, not exactly ending fiat, but we're getting pretty close. We're going to get pretty close. All right. Let's just acknowledge that's a bright sun coming in here at the 45th parallel, right? We like this beautiful sun. My kids are outside right now enjoying the sunlight. University of Florida, yeah, okay. So anyway, the sun is up, and what do we got? We got a Bitcoin running, right? We're great. Let's talk about what's new. Yeah, I'm not. As someone who is not really American, right? I only pretend to be American. I don't really I know about the Ivy Football League, and I know a little bit about some of the big U.S. football teams, and I guess the Gators are a famous team, right? The Florida Gators. I think they've had a few historic players. And I know there's a college not far from here on the Canadian side, and they're also the Gators. And they're a bit of a USA-style college. It's a very New England-y buildings and campus and all. It's very gorgeous. And they have a team called the Gators. They're not very good. So what I do know about college football, partly because my college in Canada remains the greatest college football team thing going on in Canada. It's the Quebec City team. And I used to go to the games all the time. The law school had a really cool setup where we would just be on the track. There's like a track and field track around it. And so we would be there, and people, real American culture. We had, only about 20,000 fans a game, totally packed all the time. But that's the biggest college stadium in Canada. You could buy 6 packs of beer, and what everyone would do is they'd get the 6-pack, the cans with the ring, the 6 rings to keep them on. And what you would do is you take one can out, and then you'd tie the rest of them through your belt. So everyone's walking around with these 6-packs on their belt. Ivy football, Austin. I mean, we were just talking about it the other day. A lot of people don't realize the Ivy League is a football league. It's nothing to do with academics. Like, that's not true, right? It was just a football league. And a lot of people don't realize that American college sports are really where the professional sports come from, right? They were originally college sports. The Olympic Games, coming out of Europe, was the European jealousy, let's say, of American college enthusiasm for sports. And there was a time when the French realized that some war they had at the last turn of the century in the late 1800s, that the reason they lost to the British in this war was because they weren't as fit, because they didn't have as much rugby and stuff like that in the college culture in France. And they saw that in England, and they saw that way more in America. So Pierre de Coubertin, for war reasons, reignited the Olympic Games as a kind of non-university private way of getting athletes involved in this kind of stuff. So that's a bit of the history, right? That's where it all comes from. And by the way, if anyone tells you any different, it's not true. The United States invented professional sports with baseball. That's the original professional sport. There's no such thing as professional sports before that. It's more patronage. It's more rich people throwing money at plebs to kill themselves, and night jousting and all that kind of shit. So there was no such thing as just like average people buying a ticket that subsidized the playing of a game. That's entirely invented in America. No way around it. Anyone who tells you soccer, right, that was like communist labor shit, right? Give the stupid plebs a ball to kick around, and that's all they can handle. So not a big soccer fan, by the way, right? The reason I'm not a soccer fan is very simple. American males watching American sports know what it looks like when men get hit. It doesn't look like soccer. I'm a hockey fan, all right? You ever seen Canadian judo, right? It's when you like grab a guy's shirt and punch him in the face because he can't use his arm anymore, right? We're used to that. If you in hockey roll around on the ice and pretend you're injured, the next time you're going to be injured, right? If you try that soccer stuff, you're dead meat. We don't like it, right? So there you go. There you go. All right. Okay. I've been making you wait for the best part of the show, right? Sorry about that. That's sports and sports ball, right? It's a type of NPC anyway, where we talk about sports ballers. In my upcoming book, Tom's asking about it. Will there be any info on how to deal with good friends that are Bitcoiners? And also, Tom, it is the last chapter of the book. So the formula is you use Bitcoin to identify an NPC, right? It's a very simple formula. If they don't have a Bitcoin first contact story, automatic NPC. Just because NPCs, one of the ways you can identify an NPC is they have no stories about themselves or opinions about the world. So they usually don't have a memory, right? Which is a strange thing to say, but like ask them about their childhood and they'll be like, I don't know what happened, right? But one of them is they have no idea about Bitcoin. So that's just the first one. Then you can use their Bitcoin origin story to actually specify what type of NPC they are. In my story, I've got credentialists, followers, Karens, sports ballers, nihilists, crypto bros. So you go through the different ways of engaging them. The next chapter is called electrifying them, how to use Bitcoin to wake them up, right? And it's not arguments. There's no arguments. It's spell casting, right? It's literally like saying words in an order that will make them go down a road and think about something differently for the first time, maybe. They're not guaranteed. It's more baseball statistics, right? It's like if you get it right 3 times out of 10, you're actually the greatest, one of the top wizards out there, right? So you can actually convince people using this from time to time. Then you move from electrifying and sort of waking people up You move into U.S. politics, which I have a special chapter on because of the weapons grade brainwashing that's involved and how Bitcoin can fit in that. But finally, the last chapter is on Bitcoin NPCs and about us internally being an NPC, and basically coming up with this idea that the stay humble part of Stay Humble and Stackats is really important, right? More important than people realize. So yeah, there's definitely a whole bunch of material, not just on the NPC Bitcoiners in your life, the NPC inside of you, because we're all NPCs, guys. Hate to break it to you. Now we can pierce out, right? But it's part of us too. So there you go. Yeah, credentialism. Yeah, yeah, they are super smart. Yeah, credentialism is one of the big ones. So what I talk about for the Bitcoiner NPCs is also people who are just addicted to the dopamine of like online engagement and ragement, right? Like everyone online who's calling everyone a retard all day and like fiat retards and all that stuff. So basically anyone who's addicted to the drug of dopamine and its instant delivery and doesn't really embrace the Austrian school of low time preference, right? Just that you're wrong about Bitcoin. So that's part of it, right? I made a podcast about Bitcoiners need to be more humble with Matt Odell. Like I said, it's the last chapter of the book. The book is ready. It's only about 7,000 or 8,000 words, so it's not really long at all. It is really a handbook, written as a spell book for the toxic microdosing approach to dealing with your friends and family who are NPCs, right? So, all right. I've been making you all wait for Moscow time. For the second time, I have to apologize. We have to get into the Moscow time because today's Moscow time is one of the best. I couldn't believe the amount of stuff I found, but let's just work into it slowly because I got so much stuff today. The one audiobook, I think I'm going to maybe do another one of those YouTube things, but this one I can read myself. That's what's been holding up the YouTube audiobooks of Satoshi Winning Murders. I can't get the AI to speak properly anymore, and I'm having trouble. So there you go. When ship the book? Okay, we got to get to Moscow time here, CK. We got to get to Moscow time. The Bitcoiner's Guide to NPC Management is ready. Pictures are ready. I've edited it. CK, if you want to do an edit, I'd be happy to send it to you today if you want to take a little bit of a look. Because I could use your help. I need a few more eyes before I publish, but I'm pretty much ready. It's a strong book. So, and pretty funny if I do say so myself. I laugh at it often as I've been reading it. So there you go. All right, let's get into some Moscow time. First of all, CoinDesk published this. So it's not necessarily fake news. It's not because of CoinDesk. It's just one of the inverse Kramers. I just got to get it out there because it's sort of part of Moscow time, right? Inverse Kramer. So October 11th, last week, Kramer. It can't get better than this. He says, Mr. Bitcoin is about to go down big. Boom. Thanks, man. This one's amazing. Okay, so this is from Fortune magazine. All right, this is from Fortune magazine. This is an actual headline in the fake news today. Check this out. The standard American household is now a millionaire, according to the Federal Reserve. It may be hard to believe while money is so tight amid the cost of living crisis, but the average American household has achieved millionaire status. The average American households are now millionaires, guys. We're all rich. We're doing great. But why would this headline come? The Economist is saying more and more Americans, this is from The Economist, right? More and more Americans are drawn to Europe's universal health care, efficient public transport, lower crime, and lower income equality. Apparently, a bunch of Americans are moving to Europe, according to The Economist. It's a sponsored article. You've been waiting for me to mention this one on Moscow time. I'm about 2 days late on it, but it's just too good. My wife brought it up yesterday. I hadn't seen it. I usually get this stuff first, but the new no sharing headline thing on X is making it. I miss sometimes now. I got to find new systems to get the best fake news out there and to be the first to bring you the fake news. Because I'm a little embarrassed I wasn't the first to bring this to you. This is from Harvard, guys. It's from Harvard, okay? Harvard just ran a big time study, all right, that they say proves that red meat consumption is associated with increased type 2 diabetes risk. So, guys, if you keep eating the steaks, you're going to get diabetes. All right. It causes diabetes. That was in there. What are you going to do? So lots of people laughing about it. Sean Baker, the jacked kind of Bitcoiner, he broke the study down. If you want to see the actual breakdown of the science that Harvard uses, the science, you should see the amount of science that goes on in this study. Imagine the science it takes to prove that red meat causes type 2 diabetes. Imagine the science you need to deploy to come up with that. It's amazing, right? Science, such good science. So there you go. We've also got Anthony Fauci here, who warns that he has nightmares. So he's having nightmares about the next inevitable pandemic. That's what Fauci says. There's an inevitable pandemic, and he's having nightmares. I think he should be having nightmares about something else. What is it again? I don't know if he should be so worried about a pandemic, but maybe a little bit of RFK AG space drop would be a little more appropriate for him to have nightmares about. He's not quite there yet, though, but he might wake up. So we talked a little bit about all those. We talked about all the Americans being so rich, right? They're all millionaires now. According to Fortune magazine, they're all the average Americans are millionaires. Well, the Bank of England also has a plan, right? Because the runaway wealth that's going on. So the Bank of England, right? Raise Bank of England inflation target to 3%, says leading think tank. Resolution Foundation also calls for the bank to have power to set negative interest rates in response to future downturns. So that's what's going on over there. Pretty good for England, right? Pretty good. So that's what we got. Oh, no, I got one more. This one's good too. Jamie Dimon rips central banks are being 100% dead wrong on economic forecasts. Now, I don't know why. There's something in me that thinks Jamie Dimon is, I understand he's a propagandist and things like that, but something about him makes me think that when the chips come down, he's going to bet on the separation of money and state. That's just me. Something about him makes me think he's all about it. I could be 100% wrong, 100% wrong, right? But something about it makes me say. So when I hear him say this, I love it, right? 100% dead wrong is what he said about the financial analysts. So he definitely warned about locking an outlook for the economy. He says, prepare for possibilities and probabilities, not calling one course of action since I've never seen anyone call it. The head of the largest U.S. bank by assets said, I guess he's in Saudi Arabia now, and he's just lighting the Fed up, which is great. It's funny. We got, Jamie Dimon. I don't know shit about what incentivizes him, what his real motivations are. Max Kaiser always thinks he's one of the worst people in the world. He might be. I don't know. Something about him makes me say there's some redeeming quality inside of him, but I'm probably wrong. Right? For me, it's just the humor that comes out of it. All right. So today's theme, we're going to be talking about the seeing the need for the separation of money and state. And it looks like more and more the actual stage is being set for this to happen. And it's an amazing thing, right? Because I look around the world right now and just look at the problems that are mounting, right? We've got demographic problems. That might be our biggest problem, right? We can go on and on about the money system being broken, and we're all pretty well versed in that, but some people say the demographics could be even worse, right? The demographic problem being that we just went through a huge generation of population growth, and now we don't really have the young people to sustain all these older people, right? Japan being at the forefront of this. If you listen to what some people say about Germany, that they'll be done as like an ethnic group in 100 years because they're reproducing at such a slow rate, and there's not much confidence about their capacity to get out of the trouble they're in. The demographics are even falling in the Islamic world, right? They were great until 20 years ago, and they're in free fall now. You get India not really reproducing at the same rate. China obviously has fallen off a cliff, right? So the largest country in the world population-wise. Some say it's not even anymore, right? Some people say India's already past it. But nevertheless, you have this huge demographic conversation out there. But here's the simulation-y thing that I find amazing and that gives me a lot of confidence in where we're headed and why I'm super optimistic about where we're going here. It's simple. The things we need, right? The things we need to solve the problems seem to be coming at the exact time that we need them, right? So you take the demographic problem and you layer in robots. Well, there is no more demographic problem. If you can get robots to build robots, then we'll have robots doing all kinds of manual labor, making decisions and helping supplement our lifestyle. I think this is a future most people would be down with. We've been thinking about it for a while. We've been wanting this for a while. But what's amazing is that the technological capacity is happening right at the moment when we need it. We need this, right? We're in big trouble if we don't have it. And you get Tesla now talking about, right? Tesla has already predicted that the robot business that it gets into, and apparently they're getting pretty good, is much larger than the car business, like way larger than the car business. It's not even in the same planet. And, what would you pay for a robot to come and help you and do your stuff, right? Would it 5,000, 10,000? Most people would pay that much money to have one of these helpers that would, help them on the property and things like that. Basically, the droid world of Star Wars, right? So that's one thing that's there. The other thing would be, of course, energy, right? We have the shale revolution, we have the natural gas revolution, but now we've got the nuclear power stuff really ramping up. China putting in a new nuclear reactor today with the big water tower coolers. They're just breaking ground on another one. They've got, hundreds of them, I guess, going in. The United States apparently has plans to put a bunch in. We finally got a small modular nuclear reactor plan that's been accepted by the government as of 4 or 5 months ago. So this thing can be copied at scale afterwards. Once it's been approved once for the design, the small modular nuclear reactor can be deployed everywhere. But so the point is, when I see these huge problems, right, these huge problems coming up at the same time as the solution is growing to meet the need, demographics with robots, energy with nuclear energy. But the most important one, robots and energy aside, to me, the most important one would be the banking piece, the finance piece, the economics piece, because it looks like the old system ain't going to work, right? It looks completely broken. And then it's not just from our point of view. The Chinese situation is in big trouble. We'll talk about that in a second. But it looks like right now in America, we've got concurrently, while all this trouble is going on in the Middle East, we've got the biggest bond crash in the history of America. And now the banks are starting to feel the downturn. So it looks like you've got 4 of Wall Street's biggest banks have plummeted to levels not seen since March, right? So year-to-date losses are just compounding. So you've got the Citigroup, Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, Bank of America, all of them seeing pretty large drawdowns in their stock value, looking like their balance sheets don't make any sense, right, with unrealized losses and what's going on with that stuff. So the argument here, right, with the two systems, Chinese system having trouble, and we're gonna, there's a whole bunch of stuff written today about it, so we're going to go over it. But just contrasting and looking at the quagmire we're in, right? And it's often what I've said in the Bitcoiner's Guide to NPC Management. One of the things I often pick up on, and one of the major weapons we have, is the optimistic vision of the future and how easy it is for us to conjure an optimistic vision of the future. The whole Bitcoin fixes this meme has made it very easy for us, once you understand Bitcoin, to apply it to almost any problem in the world, because you start to see how incentives align and how, in fact, if you just rejigged how we make the commercial relationships that go into perpetuating good energy systems and good housing systems and whatever else, robot systems, whatever else anyone else is worried about in the world, the ability to perpetuate these systems and to actually create the secure financial relationships and commercial relationships, which would create this thing, just like the robots, this stuff is coming into view and exactly when we need it, right? Now, the how this all happens is maybe starting with the trouble that we see in Iran today, right? So a lot of people picking up on the Iran question, right? A lot of people saying it looks like America has made a decision to decapitate the leadership of Iran. I think that's what it looks like. It looks like the Israelis and the Americans are preparing to go do that. So there's ships headed there. A lot of people picking up on this morning. You've got the largest fleet of warships NATO has ever assembled is gathering in Eastern Mediterranean Sea. 2 U.S. carrier strike groups and an amphibious assault force, warships all over the place. So it looks like it's happening, right? Kanakoa the Great commenting on it this morning. The Pentagon is deploying 2 carrier strike groups, 11 Burke-class destroyers, a number of Ticonderoga-class cruisers, amphibious assault ships, THAAD and Patriot missile defense systems, multiple squadrons of fighter jets, strategic bombers, undisclosed assets in the Middle East. The Pentagon expects Iranian proxies to continue to target U.S. troops in the region. So it looks like the Pentagon yesterday said that they've been struck many times now by the drones, right? One-way attack drones. We know the groups conducting these attacks are supported by the Iranian, I forget what IRGC means again, but we are seeing the prospect for more significant escalation against U.S. forces and personnel across the region in the near term, coming from Iranian proxy forces and ultimately from Iran. So by virtue of our announcement over the weekend, this is the American Pentagon speaking, we are preparing for this escalation, both in terms of defending our forces and responding decisively. Again, to understand what's actually going on in that part of the world, you've got to go back and understand a bit of the censorship industry, because remember, the thing that Mike Benz has been teaching us, Mike Benz, who I invited to Bitcoin 2024 yesterday. So the thing Mike Benz has been teaching us, and I think Mike Benz is the most accurate person to follow the money when it comes to explaining the censorship industrial complex. In his mind, you can understand censorship if you actually look at the economic games being played on the side, because the economics will give you the logic of why certain things were censored, right? So his explanation here is this simple, that everything in Israel, everything going on in Israel right now is related to Iran and the natural gas flows that are there. So he says, here are some of the darkroom deals and money incentives behind the Biden blob's plan to enrich itself via natural gas deals with Iran and removing the Netanyahu government in Israel who stands in their way. So in his logic, the Israelis don't really want to get involved in taking over that oil or the gas stuff for I'm not sure what reasons, but here you go. Right? He goes, and he ties the Ken Paxton impeachment in Texas into this. What he says, the Ken Paxton impeachment, which was done with no evidence, like it's one of the most crooked things you've ever seen in the history of the United States. What he says is that it is the Bush family CIA oil intelligence mafia that's trying to kill MAGA to keep its energy cartel across the American empire. And that George Prescott Bush, so you know there's a third George Bush coming, right? I believe it's Jeb's kid, and he's a little bit Mexican. Like Jeb's wife, I guess, is Mexican or something like that. So he's even got that like power, right? The privilege of being semi-Mexican. So he can't be called, white supremacist or something like that. So, and Prescott has been, I believe he was elected in a previous administration in Texas to be the controller of natural resources. I guess he does something with the royalty contracts and exploiting the deal that the commercial side gets with the government. Something like that. I'm not sure, but he did have sort of a state elected role, and it had to do with the stewardship of the energy systems there, which is a perfect place for the cowboy cutout that Benz calls them, right? So his whole thing here is that the geopolitics of West Texas and the grand Ukraine energy play puts maximum pressure on Russia, and then they supplant it with either Texas-based LNG or they actually go and get the Iranian one, right? So the point is destroy Russia's capacity to reach their market and then go take another supply in order to basically pump it into Russia's old businesses, right? So what he's saying here is that that's why Biden, world's biggest whole of society coordinator, again, the Atlantic Council, that is now actually attacking Bitcoin mixers. All right, so the Atlantic Council, again, coming up here. sponsored by an armada of energy companies, military contractors, and NATO governments, is dying to crack open Iran's gas and guzzle profit for themselves. Whoops. So that's looks like what's going on, this Iranian piece, right? And again, we mentioned the Colonel MacArthur interview yesterday with Tucker Carlson. It's about that again, right? Talking about the Iran angle. So here going Tucker again asking. So yesterday I read my own notes. Kaneko the Great has put together his notes today, which were a little more accurate. So I'll read that part again. He goes, "Do you think we are moving towards war with Iran?" MacArthur says, "Yes, I do. What happens if the United States follows Senator Lindsey Graham's advice and begins bombing critical infrastructure in Iran?" So what I understand from Mike Benz as well is that there's only one way out of Iran as far as the oil is concerned. There's one port where it happens. So expect that port to be destroyed this week if this is really the timeline we're on, right? So he says here, Douglas MacArthur answers, "Russia will not sit quietly and watch Iran destroyed by the United States air and naval power in the region. And once Russia enters this, it becomes much more than a local conflict." So go back to the idea that Ben said, right? The point of Iran is to actually take the supply and use it to supplant Russia and their ability to feed their customers and clients, right? So I think that means China and other places, right? So here he says, Russia won't watch, they'll engage their weapons, but there'll be an economic impact. About 20% of the world's oil and potentially 25% of the natural gas comes through that Strait of Hormuz. 10-year treasury yields exceeding 5% and uncertainty about the Fed's control, record debt, and inflation means we can't really handle this kind of an impact right now. That's what the colonel is saying, right? So he's not an economics guy, but that's what he's saying. It sounds legit to me. Military considerations, he then says, Iran's arsenal of long-range, high-precision missiles would cause substantial damage to Israel. And what he's saying here is that, do you remember when Trump actually killed what was his name again? Soleimani, remember that? And everyone loved it. Wow, Trump, you killed somebody. If you remember, Iran said they were going to strike back at American bases, but they missed them. Right? Remember, a whole bunch of missiles came out of Iran and they came all around American bases and there was no casualties. It just looked crazy, but nothing actually happened, right? So what MacArthur says here is that this was done, or McGregor says, is that this was done deliberately to miss. They won't miss this time, is what he said, right? They missed deliberately last time. They won't miss deliberately this time. So bombing Iranian infrastructure, which is what the Americans, according to McGregor, is what they're planning to do. They would do the same thing back, and they could, apparently Hezbollah has a big base in Mexico, so they could be made operative at that time. So there you go. They also put a little piece here on the global ramifications. There's a possibility the conflict between Israel and Hamas could escalate from a localized conflict in Gaza to a regional or even a global one. If the United States is compelled to defend its Israeli allies from incoming attacks initiated by Iran, it's likely Russia will join the war. But here's the thing, right? Remember that everything around censorship is related to these things, right? It's related to energy plays. It's related to Nord Stream and how we continue to get like the most crazy stories about what happened there. Oh, some Ukrainian divers, right? And if people talk about it in America, then they get censored. So the ability to even do these things and have these conversations has been so hobbled and handicapped up until this point. And it's so bad that we just found out that the same FBI unit that spies on Americans regularly, we just found out that they're actually spying on the House itself. So we just found out that the Department of Justice, the Judiciary, the House Oversight and Judiciary Committee, the very one that showed the FISA abuses, the very one that showed how much spying was going on to the American presidential candidate Donald Trump in 2016 and how much it continued over the years, even when he was president, when it came to all the Mueller stuff. And it turns out that they've been the actual staffers on this committee. Now, I remember just a few years ago when I was still a staffer, and there were rumors that the CIA or FBI was spying on Senate staffers about a report that was about to come out. I can't remember the context of the report. It was some hot button political thing when Obama was still president. I don't really remember. But I remember I was still a Senate staffer at the time. And I remember the creepy feeling of being like, oh shit, they could be spying. Like I had assumed I was immune from being spied on because of my position. You know, I had top secret security clearance. I figured no one could come after and spy on what we do because we're so important, right? But I was a naive child. I found out right away, and I've told you the stories many times. I worked for someone who had been a spy when he was much younger. And so he was like, yeah, they don't give a shit about us. And he had become a senator. So he was telling me that, like, no, these people are complete scammers. They would spy on me. They'd spy on you. They'd spy on anyone. Forget it. Like, there's no such thing they respect your position or the hierarchy and separation of powers. Is a very naive thought. Now, this was big news to me as a, just at a law school person. So seeing it here, not just playing out in a matter-of-fact way, but in a very precise case that actually has the entire future of the country turning on it, right? Like what happened to Trump between 2015 with the FISA abuses and 2020 in the elections, and even today we saw Jenna Ellis yesterday, the lawyer, right, crying her eyes out. Now, two ways for her and this story to go forward, right? So yesterday, it's the third lawyer now. I guess you had Sidney Powell and Cheeseborough or whatever his name is, Cheeseman or something, some other lawyer, and now this one, right? So they're all pleading guilty. Now, there's two ways to see this, right? There's two ways to see this. You have the fake news, which is jumping in and saying, oh, everyone's spilling the beans on Trump, right? Everybody's spilling the beans. Trump's not going to survive this, right? They've made deals. They're going to testify against him. Trump is going to jail, right? All this stuff, right? But at the same time, there's another way to see it, which is the way I see it, which is they way over charged on these people, and now they're going to have to pull it back. And what these people are admitting guilt to, Jenna Ellis yesterday gets, it's a real thing. She gets 5 years of probation and a $5,000 fine or something, but there's nothing actually, like, she's not going to jail, right? There's nothing crazy like that. So, and what she has to testify about is just the truth, right? Did Trump believe he won or not, right? I think she'll tell the truth about it. Trump believed he won, and that's all that matters, right? So, what it looks like here is there's no dirt on Trump. They don't have any dirt on Trump. There's no way to do this, and they're going to try and create these stories to make it look like he's falling apart and all that stuff. But I think what we're going to see is this, she gave a very impassioned testimony. She was crying. I wish I'd have known better. I wish I could take it back. I wish I could change what I did. Now, there's two ways that this story can be interpreted in history. It's either going to be exactly this scenario, Trump and the corrupted bunch of people, or it's going to look the other way, that she was bullied by a legal system that doesn't work anymore. So we have two options for what future we're going to see. Either we believe everything that all of a sudden we believe everything the Mueller people, the DOJ, the FBI, the CIA, Biden, we believe everything they say, or we slowly wake up to what's actually going on, that America is not even close to the country we think it is. It hasn't been for some time. And we're coming up to a point where we can't have these oppositional ideas of America coexisting at one time. One has to die and one can go forward, right? So I'm not saying we're going to win for sure, but just like robots coming when our demographic problem happens, the economy in the world right now, and the reason for which you would even have censorship in the first place, according to Mike Benz, the economic reasons for censorship and to hide the corruption of government might go away. How might they go away? Well, first of all, the ability of the American government to censor looks like it's getting cornered. The ability to fund wars looks like it might go away. America still doesn't have a speaker. Imagine, we don't have a speaker. And why are we suffering? Obviously, we're not. It might actually be the thing that saves America, because we can't vote to give any money to this army anymore. And people are saying we need a speaker. We need a speaker. The best thing we can do is not have a speaker, not let the government work. If the government can't function the way it has begun to function, what are we losing out on? We're losing out on them getting spied on by third-party actors that we don't even have any insight over, like FBI or CIA. They've been subjugated by these third-party administrators for 60 years now. Since J. Edgar Hoover and Alan Dulles decided to kill John F. Kennedy and cover it up, we've had these third-party institutions running America, and it has not been a democracy. Now, again, it's what we've talked about many times. American patriotism blinds Americans to what's actually happening, and that is going away. We're coming up to October 31st, right? We're a few days away from October 31st. The first show I ever did, the first show of the Breakup, the original first ever episode, was October 31st, 2021. The reason I did it that day was because we were at the amazing coincidence, simulation winking. Martin Luther put his separation of money and state, or separation of church and state edicts up on the church door on October 31st, 15 whatever. And from there, we got the result of the separation of money and state. Of course, the white paper is written, posted online the same day, October 31st, 2008. And it suggests a separation along the same scale. Instead of church and state, we're talking about separating money and state. And the two states that actually run the finances of the world right now are collapsing. Now, in the case of America, the collapse is coming with censorship with it, right? So we're seeing the censorship hiding the collapse, hiding the perversion of the financial system. On the other side, we've got China, right? So what's going on in China? Well, Kyle Bass, if you guys know who Kyle Bass is, right? So Kyle Bass, let me just give one more point about the DOJ, Rod Rosenstein, and all these people. The DOJ under Ross Rosenstein obtained grand jury subpoena for the records of Chuck Grassley's Russiagate investigator. So they called, family members and stuff. Foster played a key role in the Senate GOP in uncovering the FBI DOJ abuses in Russiagate. The subpoena seems to be related to an investigation. It's another FISA thing, right? So, and then here's Mike Benz proving that the China-Iran energy situation is already in play, right? He says, because this fella here is saying the U.S. will never allow and will sacrifice as many Iraqis and civilians as it takes to keep oil and gas from Iran flowing outside of the sanctions net, right? So that's what this guy's saying. Mike Benz says, no, don't be stupid. It's already happening, right? Iranian natural gas is already going through China, already going through Azerbaijan. That's why we see the trouble in Azerbaijan right now, why it's not really being discussed, Azerbaijan and Armenia, right? So here he goes and explains, right, that we see it all around. You get Reuters publishing this article. China saves billions of dollars from record sanctioned oil imports. Iran boosts, this is from Vox, Voice of America propaganda. Iran boosts cheap oil sale to China despite sanctions. The New York Times, China with $400 billion Iran deal could deepen influence in Middle East. The Caspian News, Iran to double volume of gas swap with Azerbaijan. So it's going through Azerbaijan and headed to China. China is absolutely, without any question, buying oil from Iran. It looks like they can get it across land. It looks like it's a Silk Road type of infrastructure. You don't need to go by the Strait of Hormuz. You don't need to go by the water. They're pumping it out the back door, and it's getting there. The Russian oil is getting to China. The Iranian stuff is getting to China. So indeed, America taking over the Iran oil fields is not as simple as it looks, right? It's not the same as what America has done in the past. So if you go from there, and you add in what Kyle Bass is saying. So I'll read what Kyle Bass says, right? So Kyle Bass says the following, and this is based on a Financial Times article. So Kyle, if you guys don't know who Kyle Bass is, Kyle Bass might be an asset, right? As far as CIA messaging, persuasion, things like that go. Kyle Bass, though, was an early Bitcoiner. I spoke to him about Bitcoin in 2016. He is probably part of this cowboy situation down with the Bushes in Texas. He's been a China hawk for a long time. He's been talking China economic war for a long time now. I don't really know what makes his world go round. right? So I'm just going to read what he says here. But I do find his assumptions here wrong. All right, but I'm not trying to prescribe anything that I have some mind reading insight into what Kyle Bass thinks. I don't really know. I put a few pieces together. I'm still trying to get him to speak at an event, but he is an old time Bitcoiner and has been aware about Bitcoin. He was one of the original rich people to be interested in Bitcoin. That's why I went after him. Our professional asset managers, Forex trader. He's a Forex trader, as I understand. So here's what he says, right? He says, China is experiencing a USD funding crisis, similar to the rest of the emerging world. Xi was forced to visit the PBOC, the People's Bank of China, and safe for the first time ever yesterday, is what he's saying. China's banking system is in free fall, and Xi has been forced to sell U.S. Treasury bonds and U.S. stocks to stem the decline in China USD balances globally and to defend the Chinese renminbi. China's SAFE has been lending USD balances to Chinese banks, instructed to protect the Chinese currency in a move reminiscent of South Korea in 1998. And I lived in South Korea not long after this. I lived in South Korea in 2002, 2003, 2004, and again in 2008 and 2009. And I started a business in Korea in 2017. And by start a business, I just made CoinDesk Korea out of CoinDesk. We licensed content to them. So anyway, I experienced this Korean thing in real time in a sense, because it was only 4 years later and everyone was still trading Forex like crazy when I lived there. And that taught me about Forex at the time. You'd go out with these girls and they'd be like, yeah, I'm slinging coins. And I was like, what are you talking about? It was a big lesson to me. So China is running desperately low on USD balances due to the aggressive state-run marketing and market intervention. The Korean crisis was caused by the government hiding the fact that they were using USD reserves to prop up the Korean won by lending them to the Korean banks to maintain an artificial exchange rate. Investment decisions were made on political grounds as opposed to economic grounds. So what Kyle Bass is suggesting here is that we're making decisions on economic grounds. Like, is that true? Is that true? No, of course not. Korea lied to the world about its FX reserves and suffered a 95% decline in its ongoing currency, along with massive USD defaults across its corporate and government sectors. China is doing the same thing, is what he's saying, right? Expect more forced selling of US stocks and bonds by Chinese institutions. Remember, in an angry knee-jerk reaction, Xi sloppily fired the head of the PBOC, Yi Gang, at the 20th Party Congress in October 2022. Yi Gang also lost his seat at the Central Committee. He was reappointed as central bank head a few weeks later, but fired again in July. Just imagine how the world would react if we abruptly fired Jerome Powell, rehired him, and fired him again a few months later. Xi is panicking, is what Kyle Bass says here. Does he panicking? Okay, well, let's see. China is experiencing massive financial instability, both a liquidity and a solvency crisis in Chinese real estate, which immediately precipitated a banking crisis, given the levels of leverage to the property sector. Be prepared for large currency breaks and additional global instability. Number go down. And it does look like China is increasing stimulus now, right? They're getting more debt. Local governments have reached a debt limit, but the central bank in China is trying to sell even more U.S. treasuries and stocks to keep the yuan from weakening, right? There was sort of a wholesale reordering of what's going on over there in China. And this is what it looks like, right? So the other way, this is the two movies thing again, right? So that's the way an American, maybe Texan propagandist thinks of it, right? Oh, they need dollars over in China. If they don't have dollars, all they want is dollars. If they don't get dollars, they can't pay the bills. They're going to go bankrupt. That's what I read him saying. Their whole goal to get dollars, right? But that's not really what happened, right? That's not exactly what happened. Here's what here's a serious report with a rebuttal to Kyle Bass. And he says, meanwhile, Chinese investors are dumping U.S. treasuries and stocks because they know the U.S. is in terminal decline. It has nothing to do with trying to get more U.S. dollars. They don't want to be near the fire when it ignites. China's banking system won't fail because they are state-owned, even assuming they are in such a precarious position. China has massive Forex reserves in excess of $3 trillion. It runs a massive trade surplus and has relatively small external debt obligations. China instigated policy decisions to unwind its real estate bubble, Evergrande being a case in point. China is dumping USTs to buy gold because, like other prudent nations, it knows what is coming. The US is the nation with a zombie financial system, massive unsustainable asset bubbles, including real estate, a failed economy buoyed by the inclusion of government spending, recycled debt, and booking the full value of goods to which it contributes next to nothing of its value. It also runs enormous budget and trade deficits. The world is rejecting the dollar, and the US resorts to printing its own currency because foreign entities will not buy its debt. Now, it's true that there's another China developer that went down today, Country Garden, right? They're in default on their dollar bonds. So you get this whole idea here, right? But here's, I think, the best way to judge this stuff. And it actually comes from two articles, one from the South China Morning Post and the other from the New Yorker today. All right. So the New Yorker going along with Kyle Bass's thing, right? Oh, China. And they have a whole article today, Reporter at Large, China's Age of Malaise, right? Party officials are vanishing, young workers are lying flat, and entrepreneurs are fleeing the country. What does China's inner turmoil mean for the world? So this is another one of these doom and gloom articles about China, right? S.L. Canthan says the following. He says, this is a psychological self-therapy for Americans who need to assure themselves of their own greatness every week. If China is collapsing, why don't you remove all the sanctions on Chinese tech companies, right? That's what they're saying. The sanctions, if they're in such trouble, why would you keep the sanctions there? Michael Pettis in the South China Morning Post's article. Well, I read those in backwards, pardon me. Another person broke down this New Yorker article, but it's related, so I'm going to read them all together in a second. The Michael Pettis one here, this is about the changes in China, the things that Kyle Bass was mentioning about, and the things that we heard about in that other article. So here's what they're saying, right? According to the South China Morning Post, they've created something totally new. Instead of the PBOC, which is what Kyle Bass was talking about Xi having to go to the PBOC, it looks like the whole thing was changed, and that chair of the central bank doesn't matter anymore because the system has changed. And here's what they say. They've created something called the Central Finance Commission, right? And decision-making powers moved to the Central Finance Commission. And now the PBOC, this is a big change. The PBOC is just enforcement apparatus. It's like the SEC now, right? They just do some enforcement and that's it. He says, he adds that Beijing has good reasons to make changes. After 2 decades of exuberance, China's financial industry has turned into a landmine of bad debts and corruption scandals. The mess needs a centralized power involving many political, social, and strategic recalibrations. So he goes on to just say that this rebalancing of the economy and turning things into something that's completely different is what's needed, a new system, a new way to orient themselves. And so he says here that the more centralization of power is probably necessary part of repairing the system. Beijing must first change the development model, reverse the income imbalances, and accept many years of much slower growth. Without that, there is no way to clean up the financial mess. Now, go back to this New Yorker article about the malaise, right? And what's going on there. And to me, this is where the chance for Bitcoin in America and China starts to become very apparent, right? So that whole article in the New Yorker, the malaise of China, everyone's disappearing, right? Glenn Luck says the following about it. He says, in a sweeping essay, the writer tries to capture the nation's zeitgeist, focusing on tightened controls on life under Xi. And he says, I've heard sentiments in many circles, right? But here's what he says. But I question if they are representative or coming from a highly selected elite, right? And here's his logic. Just take a look at the sample of quotes and pay close attention to their backgrounds, right? A young man from a top university. So they go to the New Yorker, they write, oh, China's in big trouble. A young man from a top university, a exiled real estate developer, right, that admits corruption with a caveat. But others were worse, right? A lawyer that helps wealthy Chinese people escape. Those were the people they cited for this story, right? It's hardly representative. Not only are we talking about elites, but even within this highly selected pool, it further skews towards dissidents and exiles. Somewhat tellingly, these are folks that are considered to be among the nation's most accomplished citizens. It is hard enough to capture the collective vibes of a nation of 1.4 billion through selected anecdotes and quotes. is even harder when those anecdotes and quotes are pulled from a circle built on a highly selected sliver of society. Self-awareness is critical here. I don't disagree with the sentiments. Like I said, I've heard similar themes in my circles. But when I hear those things, I consciously remind myself that PE, VC, tech entrepreneurs, real estate developers, top university graduates don't broadly represent China. The author looks back fondly at his time from China between 2005 and 2013 with unfettered nostalgia. But has he balanced this out by considering some of the darker darker times in those days? I remember this period not only for its growth and optimism, but also the large systemic corruption and excess that played a fundamental role in driving it. And I would argue strongly that not addressing systemic corruption was China's single largest existential threat in 2012. The author pays lip service to this, right? But doesn't really get into it. He says the article does a decent job of capturing the zeitgeist of a small sliver of elites, but doesn't do a good job of understanding what's going on with the 1.39 billion people outside of this thing. So here's what I'm seeing. The separation of money and state. So China's whole plan now is to go centralized, have an enforcement body that's going to go around and arrest people and root out corruption and blah, 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 blah. But they need a new development model anyway. How are they going to build all this kind of stuff, right? So the whole world integrated into the US dollar system, and it doesn't look like it's going to continue. It looks like China is getting out. They completed a transaction yesterday, the first ever with Brazil. What does it look like? The size of it was pretty impressive, right? So it's, let's look at the size. I did copy it. Several billion dollars. Let me see. Here it is. Yeah. So it was, oh yeah. So here you go. China's first cross-border commercial loan to the Brazilian market. Another milestone for China and Brazil. It's $1 billion won loan and another $300 million loan. So $1.3 billion loan. And it's going to be used to build a hydroelectric power station in Brazil. All right. So China funding energy creation around the world with its bank, probably going to create a situation where, the central authority is not going to be capable of managing all of this stuff. Things are going to break. Things are going to leak as far as a tight centralized system right now. Indeed, they need something new in China. But if you actually start to look at it, if you start to say, well, what's the best case scenario here? It is Americans waking up and realizing they've been lied to because of money, right? And we see the spying, we see the chaos, we see the rest of the world de-dollarizing. It's going to happen, right? Nobody wants to live with a corrupt group of a military industrial complex running on the world stealing resources, right? China's not going to live with it. Russia's not going to live with it. Iran's not going to live with it. So Americans now, right, seeing the censorship if they can, but the censorship almost all being directed to keep the narrative of good guy, bad guy. It's okay if we steal their stuff, right? So if this doesn't hold, and I don't think it will, China's not going to participate. Now, China has its own problems, right? China, in this case, the elites are angry. Are the not elites going to be happy with what's going on, right? Probably not. Probably not. If they get anything wrong here, if this centralized new system to control the money and doesn't work, and I doubt it will, why are they better at centralization than Americans? No one's good at it. It doesn't work. So just like the problems of the world in demographics or energy that seem insurmountable, but the solutions arise at the same time, the problems we have with censorship and actually being able to make a clear financial deal. So that's what's happened, is that because fiat is now so infused with brainwashing, you can't actually get good commercial activity around the world anymore. It's all political. It's all geostrategic. World War III is psychological and economic. Therefore, these things will not become coordinating principles of a peace plan. There's only one peace plan coming. There's only one coming, and it is the separation of money and state. It might take a while for people to realize it, but for all the right reasons, the average Chinese people here are in a very similar position to the average American people. They're both disillusioned with their financial systems. They're both suffering from the ill effects of the combination of money and state, and they're both going to be calling for a change. At the same time, with the same availability of a solution, Bitcoin there for both of them. So we're in the actual end game here, guys. This is going to be ever seen. It already has been. When I started saying probably last spring that we were in, no, it's kind of at the beginning of the summer, right? When I started saying what we're in store for here, the find out part of the story, right? When all of the mirages and illusions disappear and we start to see things more clearly and the psyops start to melt away. The revelations and truth we're about to find out are way more interesting than anything we've ever seen in history until now. We'll even have a glimpse into real history as a result of this, because history, of course, is one of the most fiat subjects out there, completely fake. Just like you see with the Jenna Ellis thing, right? And that's what we're fighting for. We're fighting to see how her testimony yesterday will be interpreted by history. Will it be interpreted as someone who really thought that Donald Trump was running a scam, that he believed he lost the election and wanted to dupe people? Or will it be seen as someone who was bullied by the media and the powers that be in America in order to come up with this testimony to save her own butt, right? So it looks like we're there. People will be able to choose, and China and America intersecting on a very interesting financial recalibration. So we're almost there, guys. We're almost there. All right. That's all I got for today. How did we do? How did we do? How did we do? A lot going on this morning, everyone. A lot going on. All right, team. That's all I got for today. I hope you're doing great, and I'll see you tomorrow. We got a bit of rain. Got a little bit of rain going on. Thanks for the great show. Thanks, Lightning Vend. Now, remember, the point is so you don't stress out about this stuff, right? China's youth are in a huge crisis. Many reported still with parents who are forced to live in shared hostels to continue useless post-studies. Also could swear you were going to whiteboard today. Yeah. So we were supposed to. We're going to do it tomorrow. The whiteboard, my kids wrote all over it yesterday with not exactly my markers. So I'm blaming it on the kids. They did it with like the washable ones, which is fine, but I actually have to wash it off. And there's a bit of scrubbing. So you can see there's some stuff. I had to spend about the time I would have taken to draw something just before I ended up having to clean it up. So P-Man, I hope we can get there without blowing ourselves up. Yeah. Yeah, so exactly what I'm saying, Muslim Bitcoiner, though. The Chinese youth in a huge crisis. Now, I get what they're talking about in the fake news New Yorker article, right? The elites have a different game to play. They might believe all of this stuff. The normie people that aren't the elite, I'm not saying they're not in a huge crisis, but the appetite, the void, right? Nature abhors a vacuum, and the vacuum being created by the terrible Chinese leadership and the terrible American leadership, especially when it comes to their financial economic war that they're engaging in. The result is you can actually see the opening there for people to rush in and fill the void. It's the same thing that happened when we separated money and our church and state, right? The inability of the church to actually find solutions to the problems that people were facing was the reason why people turned away from that and all of the financing and all of that stuff. So what we can see here is the same lack of incentive to continue to participate in the system, which I think is there, right? So there you go. All right, team. Peace. Have a great day. Sip of coffee.